Hey everybody! Today we're going to make a tile set map editor in HTML, CSS, and JavaScript. And so what that means is if you look over here, I have this kind of map image, and this image is made up of little slices called tiles. On the menu on the left, I have this spread of different tiles. What I can do is grab one and then come over here to the map and click and drag, kind of create a whole little world here. It's a lot of fun. It's a common technique used in video games where you might have a big, large 2D area that's actually made up of a lot of repeating elements. And using a tile set can often be way more performant than like having pre-rendered versions of all the maps and stuff like that. But you can work like that too, and this tool will give us kind of both options. So a few things here. One, you see I have editing layers. So there I was just on the bottom layer where the gray was kind of going to the bottommost layer. But if I wanted to layer something on top of the gray, say like a shadow, I could come up a layer to the middle layer, then put that on the shadow. You see if I zoom in here that the gray is still there. That kind of allows us to do shadows and these fences and things like that. Definitely important for any image editor to have the concept of layers. We can also export the image. So if I click this image or this button, it's going to create a actual PNG image of what we made in the tile set editor, which is great. So if you wanted to use the final image, you could just download it and use it in your project. Finally, we have a clear canvas button, and what that's going to do is exactly what it sounds like. I click it, and then everything we've already made is gone, so I can come back in and start brand new, fresh. Let's talk through the code pen that we will use for this project today. As always, I've kind of pre-populated some HTML and CSS just to get us going a little bit faster, but not to worry, we'll walk through all of it right now. What I have here is just a basic header, and there are two buttons in the header along with our title. And these buttons are here, but they don't actually do anything right now. We'll layer in the functionality as we go. Then I have the card body, and on that we have a sidebar. And this is where our menu is going to go that has all of the tiles that we can choose. Again, we'll get that going in a second here. We'll talk about this cross origin bit on the tile set source in a second too. And then also some commented out pieces of UI that we'll bring back in. Again, I don't want there to be any magic here really. Then in the main column of our card, I have a canvas tag. It's where we're going to copy the data of the tiles onto the canvas. We'll cover that too. And then finally some pre-written UI for editing the layers, which we have functions here that are ready to go on click, but they're not actually wired up yet. We will do that now. Moving on to the JavaScript pane here, what I've done is pre-populated some basic element selections, things that we're going to be using a lot, so it just makes sense to have them saved to a variable. First we grab our canvas tag, and that is, again, going to be where the tile set data gets copied over to as we paint with the mouse. We have our tile set container and selection. The container is going to be just the div that holds the options that we have, and the selection is the little square outline that kind of designates which tile is selected right now. And then the whole image that lives inside the container is going to be the tile set source. We'll get to that in a second. And then just some pieces of initial state where we have selection designation, and this is going to be an array of X, Y coordinates. So if you have the top left tile selected, this array will be 0, 0. If you had the first tile over, it would be 1, 0. It's like X on the left, Y on the right. Some more initial state. We have current layer, and that speaks to which layer is selected right now. It's a little backwards, but the bottom layer is going to be the first in the array, and then middle, top. We'll talk through that in a second. And then finally, our data structure is going to look kind of like this, where we have an array of layers. Again, the first one, so the 0th one, is the bottom layer, and then we have middle and top. And inside each layer, we're going to have an entry that looks like, I'm going to zoom in a smarter way here. We're going to have an entry that looks like this. For each key, and this is going to be the position of the tile. So say 1, 1 would be like 1 over from the top, 1 down from the bottom. I said that backwards, but you get it. It's like over 1, down 1. And then which tile was actually selected. So this is going to speak to, in our tile set, which tile are we placing at this position. And like we said in the intro, we have 3 layers, so we can position things on top of each other. You could have as many layers as you want here, but for simplicity's sake, I kept it to 3. Okay, I have zoomed out and we are back and ready to go. The first thing we want to do is populate the options of tiles that we have. And to do that, I could come into this image tag and add a source, and that would normally work. But for the sake of this demo, it's super critical that we get the image to load before we do a lot of these other JavaScript initializations. And so to do that, I'm actually going to use JavaScript to add in the source of the image so that we have more control over the order that things happen. So to do that, I'm just going to, remember we selected it at the top of the file there. So I'm going to say tilesetImage.source. If you didn't know, you can just select any image you want and pipe in a new string for the source. That's how a lot of like lazy loading libraries work. And I'm just going to paste in the source to our image here. Get it nice and wrapped up. And of course, none of this will work if you spell stuff wrong, which I'm terrible at. I'm sorry. So I'll fix the spelling there, and then the source will be piped into the correct thing. And now you can see that the image has appeared on the left side of the screen. Like I said before, the whole reason we're doing this with JavaScript is so we have some more control over what happens after this image is loaded. And so what we want to do is attach like a little bit of a initialization function for the whole app here that will happen after this tileset image is loaded. And so to do that, I'm going to take the same element here and add a dot on load equal. And what this does is create a callback. So whenever the browser has loaded the image, this function will call, and this will allow us to do stuff like init that we'll fill in a little bit. Now, before we can start showing stuff on the canvas, we need data in our application state for us to draw to the canvas. And so to get us started, I'm just going to hard code in some, or not really hard code, I'm going to like manually populate the first pass of state here. And so remember that each layer is an object. The keys of the object are going to hold the position of the placement of the tile. And so if we wanted a tile in the very top left corner of the map, that would look like this, 0-0 for 0x, 0y. We're going to give a array as the value here, and the array is going to hold what tile is placed at this position. And so again, just to keep things really simple, I'm going to use the top left one. So how about 0, 0? What that should do is place, once we're actually drawing this to the canvas, that will take this top left sliver, this one tile, and put it at the top left corner of the canvas right here. Now that we have data to draw, let's go ahead and make an actual mechanism that'll do it. So what I'm going to do is just create a function called draw. And the first thing we want to do, pretty common in any canvassy thing, is we're going to grab a reference to the context of the canvas. That's going to give us access to some methods that will allow us to draw things to the canvas and clear the canvas and whatever we want. And so to do that, I say canvas, which if you remember, we referenced up here at the top, canvas.getContext. And then in here, because we're working on a 2D platform here, 2D project, we just throw in the string 2D. The next thing we want to do, and this might seem a little premature, but I'm going to get it out of the way now, is we actually want to clear out the canvas anytime we draw it. So anytime we run this draw method, we want to clear out what was there before so that we just have a fresh coat of paint every time. That'll prevent some layering problems. You see, some of our tiles don't actually cover up the entire space, like say these letters. So if you had a floor and then you pasted a letter on the same layer, it would only remove the pixels, or only overwrite the pixels that are covered by the actual letter shape, and we want to overwrite the entire tile. And so to do that, we're just going to clear out the canvas, and then every time we run this draw function, it'll be fresh every time. So to do that, we use our context, and we say clear rect, and then we pass in the coordinates that we want to clear. And so for us, it's just going to be the entire thing. So you can say 0, 0 to start from the top left, and then we already have a reference to our canvas element. So we say canvas.width, which will just know how big this is, canvas.height. And if we knew the sizes, we could just, we do know the sizes, we could just put them right here. But the nice thing about this is that if you ever change the size of your canvas, then this line of code doesn't have to be updated. It'll just know how big the canvas is. Now we're going to establish just a kind of baseline variable here. The tile set that we're working with is designed at 32 by 32 cell sizes. And so we're going to be using 32 a lot. So basically what I want to do is just size of crop. Actually, I'm sorry. In switching programming languages, some use underscores, some use camel case like this. So size of crop is going to be equal to 32 pixels because we're going to be using 32 a lot. So this just gives us one nice clean reference to that value. Let's get into the guts of drawing here. What I'm going to do is iterate through our layers. So layers.for each, and then for each layer, what we're going to do is take each placement in that layer and then add it to our canvas. And so to do that, first we need to extract this XY value from our key. Way I like to get keys from a layer. Remember, layer is going to be an object right here. What I like to do is say object.keys, and we give it the object, which is layer right now. And then for each, got like loops and loops and loops here. For each key, so this is going to be like 0, 0, whatever this is right here. We're going to go ahead and grab the X and Y from that. So say position X. We're going to grab a number out of, actually, let's introduce that later. How about key.split? Oops, sorry, I can't type and use this mic at the same time. We're going to split it by that dash character, and we're going to take the first one. So that'll be like the left side of what's on there. And then we'll do the same thing for Y, but the problem is that right now that's going to give us a string because we're splitting a string, just taking a subset of it. But what we want, we're going to do some math with this character here, so we need it to be a number. So I'll just surround this whole thing in number, and then take this whole thing, duplicate it for Y, and then for Y we want to take the right side of the dash. So I'll change this to 1. Now we have 2 of the pieces of information we need, 2 out of 4. We know where this tile is going to go, but we don't know which tile to place there. So to do that, let's grab both of the values from the actual value of the key that we pulled. So see that in a second. So we've got 2 new variables, tile sheet X and tile sheet Y. We're going to use some array destructuring here to say layer, so the object, and then we're going to pass in the key of the object. So what this is going to do is we're passing in key out and pulling it out of layer. And so that's like us looking up this value here. And then what we're going to do is take the first value, which is the X, and save it as variable tile sheet X. And then the second value is tile sheet Y. So we've gathered 4 points of data here. We know everything about what we're going to do. Now we actually need to do it. And so to do that, we're going to use the canvas method on our context called draw image. And just before I recorded this video, I recorded a whole dedicated video on draw image because it has a few different usages. It can be kind of tricky to wrap your head around it sometimes because of all the different ways it can be used. So definitely check that out. I'll link that here if you want to learn more about this. But just to save us some kind of error, we're going to use like the longest way possible to use draw image because we need all of the arguments. And so I'm not like manually typing and messing stuff up. I'm just going to paste in some stuff and we're going to walk through it line by line. So here we go. Give us some space to read. So draw image, again, I covered it in the other video, but there's 3 different ways to do it. You can pass in 3, 5, or 9 arguments. For what we're doing here, we need all 9 of them. The first argument is the image that we're grabbing pixels from, and that's going to be our image here that we loaded in at the beginning. The next 2 arguments are where in the source image you want to grab from. Like where do you want to start grabbing from? So the top XY position of where the kind of subset should start. And so what we've done is we've grabbed our tile sheet X and tile sheet Y. This data is stored in our data set here. I've also left in these 32s because I think for this, technically we have that in a variable up here, yes, but I think for what we're looking at right now, this is just a little bit easier to read than seeing the math all over the place. So whatever we store in here, we want to multiply by 32 because we need to actually start at that pixel position in the image. Next, we tell it, we know where we're starting from, how much image do we want to grab. And so here I just used the variable 32. It's actually not going to work. I need to rename it. Size of crop. So make sure you grab 32 wide by 32 tall. And then finally, position X and position Y. This is where you want the crop to be placed. So now we know which tile, for example, maybe this one, we're grabbing from the tile set image. Now we need to know where do we place it over here. And so that's what these two arguments do. And then finally, again, when we know where we want to place it, how big should the placement be? So what we can actually do is place it larger than we grabbed it, but we don't want that. For this case, we always want to use the natural size, which is 32 pixels. So we give it that same size of crop. Now that draw image is wired up, let's try to use it. So we have this whole draw function that we've made, but we're not actually calling it yet. So remember down here we left space for initialization. Let's go ahead, after this image loads, let's call draw. What we should see is perfect, a tile from the left being dynamically drawn to the right on the canvas based on what we have in our data set. So if I go ahead and just come up here and add more, let's see, how about, need my commas. Let's say if we did 1, 1, just kind of throwing in some gibberish here, playing with some of these too. Not really sure what we're gonna get. But see, over here we have different grabs from the tile set being placed onto the canvas. So as much fun as this gibberish is, it's kind of, it's not nearly as fun as if the user actually gets to paint tiles in with the mouse. So let's do that now. First thing I'm gonna add is a little helper function here. And again, I'm just gonna paste it to save some time and then we'll talk through it. This is called get coordinates. What this is gonna do is take a click event, which is E here, and from that, based on the thing that you clicked on, we're going to determine how far away from the top left corner of the thing you clicked on was in pixels. And then what we're going to do is floor that value to a value that's even by 32. So like if I click, say over here, that would be like 60 something pixels for real. But what I want is the top left corner of the starting point of the tile. And so to do that, we just use math floor and divide mouse x, which is the actual point that you clicked, by 32 to give us that nice clean value that will look like some of the numbers that we had in here. Really, the primary reason we have this get coordinates helper anyway is so we can determine which tile the user wants to place. So to have that, I had this piece of UI in here commented out, but let's reintroduce it. So I'll uncomment this out. Within the same container div that holds the tile set, this is a position relative container. We also have a position absolute div in here that just gives us this cyan outline. And you can see there's some pre-written CSS for it. It's nothing much. It's basically just a, let's see, where is it? Right here, just like a box that has an outline on it, just so we know what is currently selected. And when we click on our menu of tiles over here, what we're going to do is change position of this cyan box. And that value is reflected in our selection array, which we defined up here. So now let's wire up the part where this value will change based on what we click on. So we're going to make use of our friend get coordinates here. I'm going to go ahead and add our first mouse listener, or event listener for the mouse. So we'll say on the tile set container, we're going to add an event listener. And then we're going to listen for the mouse down event. You could also listen for the click event, but mouse down is just a little bit snappier. Click kind of has a delay sometimes on when the mouse button comes back up. This is going to fire immediately when the user presses, so it feels nicer for like drawing art applications. Then let's just, before we like start writing data, I just want to show you kind of what we get back from get coordinates, because I hope I didn't gloss over that too much. So now we have this event wired up. If I open the console here and clear out of everything and I start clicking on the tile set, you see I get these arrays back, and that's coming from the helper. We're logging it out right here. It's telling us on the actual event, or I'm sorry, the actual position that we clicked in terms of relative tiles. So like here, for example, 1 tile over from the left, 2 from the top. And so what we can do is just use this for our new selection value. So we'll say selection, which is already defined above, equals this much. Get rid of this. And now selection will be updated. Final piece, I'm just going to paste this in really quick, is that we want to move this div around based on the new value here. And so to do that, we had an element selection from above, which is just that outline div. We grab the style.left and we define it to what's first in selection multiplied by 32, and then we add pixels to it. So this just forms a nice inline style that will get applied to this little div here. Same for the top. And then the top we use 1 for Y. So now when I click this, you see that the position actually moves around, and it's reflecting what is actually set in the selection variable here. Now we can click on the map over here, but we can't actually draw to the canvas yet. So let's go ahead and add in our first bit of mouse state for knowing if the user is clicking and dragging and painting on the actual canvas. So one more time, I'm just going to paste some stuff in right here. Let's clean some of this up. And so what we have, we're just going to establish a variable called isMouseDown, and we're going to start that as false. Anytime the mouse goes down, we're going to set it to true, and then opposite for mouse up. So to, user is no longer pressing it. Also, a little gotcha. Sometimes this is, clean that up for a second. If the mouse is down and then you drag off of it, sometimes you won't get that mouse up event, and so then the flag will stay true. So if you mouse leave at all, we're also going to set you to false. And then finally, we've got this add tile event that we're going to add next. So I'll just create the function for it. Add tile, say mouse event, and then we'll fill that out in a second. But when you actually click down, we're going to these last two bits here are going to fire off add tile that we just defined. And specifically the move one is going to have a check for here for the flag. So if you just mouse down the first time, we're going to go ahead and fire the call to add the tile. But if you're moving and you're still held down, so that flag is true, then we're going to continue to call the add tile event. To fill out this add tile event, first I'm just going to introduce some stuff here, but pretty similar to what we've seen already. We'll make a new clicked variable. This is going to use that same utility that we used before to give us the array of X and Y of the tile that was clicked. And then what we're going to do is save that value, basically kind of convert it from an array to a string, separating the values with a dash here. So this is going to look like a key, just like what we wrote before up here. Next, something we're going to add in now. We haven't totally talked about this yet, but may as well just do it now. On the mouse event that comes back, there's a property called shift key. And for the sake of this app here, what we want is if you're just normally clicking on something, we want to paint a tile to that position. But if you're holding down shift and clicking, we're going to remove a tile that's at that position. So we'll implement that in a second, but let's just say it's not. We don't care right now. In here, we're going to say layers, which is our list of layers. We're going to grab the current layer, which remember we defined up here. It starts at 0. We haven't changed it yet. So that one, on that object that this references, we're going to add a new key. And that key is going to be the string that we created right here. So that key, kind of doubling up on our object syntax there, will be equal to whatever is selected. So remember, the value of these objects are the tile that should be placed there. And so we're going to say whatever was in selection position 0 and whatever's in selection 1. Now we've modified our state, but again, to see it on screen, we need to redraw. So after this little logic block, we're going to say draw. Now over here, if I select a tile and start clicking on things, you can see that redraw is happening every time. I can click and drag, and it's working. Swinging back real quick to get this delete path, what we can do is the same thing, but instead of defining a value at that key position, we're just going to delete it. So we'll say delete that key. Now we're only ever editing that first layer, this one current layer. Remember, it's set to a value of 0 right now, but it never changes. So let's fix that. In the HTML, I have some pre-populated function click handlers ready to go. This function called setClick. It's not defined right now, so if I tried it, it would crash. That's not good. There's also some attributes on here on each button that tell us what we want the new layer to be if you click on this thing. So let's grab the name of this, come down here, and right under add tile, we'll add a new function. called set layer. And that's going to take in the new layer. And what we can do, again, I'm just going to kind of quickly paste some stuff and talk through it. So paste this. What we're going to do is set the current layer to whatever was passed in as the new layer. So that'll change it in the JavaScript state, which is good. But because we're not using like a front-end framework that binds anything to the DOM, we kind of need to manually update the active class of this stuff over here. And so what we'll do is say old active layer is whatever was currently active. And if we found something, then we're going to remove the active class. The active class is just going to put some blue, bold, different appearance, something to just tell you that this is the selected one. And then under that, we're going to select the one that has tile layer attribute of whatever we passed in that is now the new current layer. And then on that one, to the class list, we're going to add active. Right now, there's no mechanism that's setting the active class. And so what we can do is just right after we define this, in fact, not right there, but how about right after we initialize the app, we're going to add in set layer to 0. And now that you can see when the app boots up, the bottom one here gets the active class. If I inspect here, you see that this one just has the active class. If I click around, the active class will change, meaning that set layer is working properly. Okay, we are getting close. Next, we want to add in the functionality for this clear canvas button. So what we'll do is just make a new button called, or a new function called clear canvas. And then when we call it, what we're going to do is just set our layers to the same thing that we started with. So 3 empty objects, because we have 3 layers. And then now that our state has been kind of reset, we can just recall draw. Oops. And then I'll take the name of this function and come back to our HTML where we have the button. And on here, I'll just add a onClick equals, oops, clear canvas. So now when I draw some nonsense here, I hit clear canvas, the state will be reset to nothing, and then we'll redraw, all the tiles will be gone. Last feature we're going to tackle here is this export image button. And so right under clear canvas, let's do another function called export image. And that's, it sounds like it's going to do a lot, but it's actually quite simple thanks to some of the functionality in Canvas. So what we can do is make a new variable called data. And on our Canvas tag, we'll call this method called toData URL, all caps, toData URL. And what that does is take all of the content data guts of the canvas and turn it into a URL that can be passed into a new browser tab. And then the browser has the ability to read that data and actually construct the image. And from there, we'll be able to save the image to our hard drive. So to do that, we're going to make that new browser window that is going to pop open. So we'll say, and then before we do that, we're going to make some content for the browser window. So new image. And then just like we did before, we'll set this image source to be whatever came back from data here. Then what we'll do is say var w, to make this w stands for the new window we're going to make, is window.open. And it's just going to open like a blank window, which you can just pass an empty string for that. However, now we're going to modify the contents of that window. So how about document dot write, and then image.outer HTML. So this new image that we created, the HTML for it, we're going to populate into that new window. And then when we do that, we need to, it's not wired up yet. So just like we did before, we'll come back here to our HTML and add onClick equals name of that function. And when we click it, let's make some stuff here. How about a smiley face? There we go. I'll click it and it's going to open this data in a new tab like so. You see on here, what I can do is actually drag it around and right click, save it to my hard drive. If I wanted my creation here to be used for something, I could grab it straight from here. With that, our feature set for this tile map editor is complete. So thank you so much for watching to the end. Definitely appreciate that. If you like this video, please be sure to subscribe and hit the like button. If you're on Discord, my friend Glenn and I, the person I make games with, we have a Discord channel, so there will be a link to that below. Feel free to drop in, hang out with us. It'd be fun. If you have any comments or questions or things you want to see videos about, please leave a comment below or reach out to us on Discord or email me, however you want to do it. With that, I'm going to wrap up this video. So thanks again so much for watching. I'll see you next time.